Welcome back. All right, so this is one of the reverse retro hats, and I thought, well, I'll wear the original jersey that the reverse retro is based on. Um, it's weird that it doesn't match itself, and makes me wonder if teams born in 1970, the Canucks being the other one, have to have designs that when they change them, they just don't match color scheme anything at all. Buffalo's done it a couple of times. Vancouver's done it a few times. But anyways, I thought the logos match. It's fine. Jake DeBrusk. So news of the day: Jake DeBrusk healthy scratch tonight in Boston. This is a situation you could see this coming. I'm surprised he's still with the Bruins, to be honest. I would be very surprised if he's with the Bruins in the fall. I think that Jake DeBrusk has a lot of talent. I think that he will succeed and excel at the NHL level at some point. It's just not working out in Boston. There's something that's been off all season, and I'd be very surprised if he's still a member of the team in the fall. So healthy scratch tonight, and again, mildly surprised he doesn't end up moving at the deadline. But we'll see how Boston handles this, how DeBrusk handles this, and if the team continues to struggle with scoring 5-on-5, he probably just ends up going right back in. If all of a sudden tonight you see some goals, that means that the roster probably stays as it is, and maybe he ends up being a healthy scratch for a little bit longer. Speaking of players who are out of the lineup, Jonas Korpisalo out for the season for Columbus. He's done. Lower body injury. And for Columbus, watching their goaltending in the offseason this year should be interesting. Because Merzlikins is protected. They don't have to worry about him going to Seattle. They also don't have to worry about Korpisalo because they can protect him. But I do wonder about their goaltending going into next season and whether or not they keep the same tandem. We have a good feeling that at some point soon we'll see a change behind the bench, probably at the end of this season. I still think it'll be a mutual where Tortorella says, all right, I'm gonna walk away. My contract's up, and Columbus is likely gonna say, all right, cool, and they'll probably already have a plan of who's gonna take over. But the team has to change as well. There have to be changes made with the product on the ice, and Korpisalo being injured as much as he is, I would be very surprised if they don't make a change in net in the offseason. And it certainly is the best offseason to look for a change in net. With Seattle coming in, maybe one of the goalies Seattle picks up ends up being traded to Columbus. So that's possible. The most recent expansion that I did, just a mock expansion, I ended up having Seattle pick 5 goaltenders. And ended up saying, you know what? They'd pick, and they wouldn't use them all, but they'd end up being able to trade them all off for parts. When Vegas came in, they drafted way too many defensemen, and then they were able to trade them off for parts. And it ended up working out pretty well for Vegas. So with Seattle, I have a suspicion that maybe it'll be goaltenders, but we'll see. It's going to be fascinating to watch. That'll be in July, so stick around for that. Freddie Anderson, speaking of goaltenders, he hopes to return before the playoffs and at least get into a couple of games. And it's interesting that with Freddie Anderson, I like Anderson. I still think he can be one of the better goaltenders in the league. I think that Freddie is absolutely capable of being a really solid starting goaltender. I know that may not be a popular opinion at times. I know at other times it is. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with Anderson and then what the Leafs do. So if the Leafs, let's say that they go to round 3. Let's say they make it all the way to the semifinals and whoever they play against there. But what if it's Jack Campbell? Does that then mean that Anderson's out? If it's Freddie Anderson, does that mean he stays? And again, is the next contract Anderson might get offered from Toronto, is it contingent on him coming back for the playoffs, winning back his job, and helping them go on a run? And if Toronto falls in the first round, does their goaltending become then that spot that they say, and that's where the failing is? Because it feels like every year there are certain teams that'll say, all right, so we've decided this is where the issue is. With Toronto, it felt like Jake Gardiner was made kind of the scapegoat, and then coming out of last year, it was all right, we need to toughen up, so they go out and they get Simmons, they pick up Thornton, and before people say Thornton for toughness, yeah, when Thornton's fired up, absolutely. He has no problem with going out and dropping the gloves if he has to. And he'll drop the gloves with somebody who's young enough to be his kid. So, I will say that Toronto is going to be fascinating to watch, but we all know that Toronto is always, whether they win or they lose, always an interesting story. Speaking of interesting stories, it's been confirmed. The NHL announced it today. So yesterday it was kind of confirmed through the media, but now the NHL has announced the details. So ESPN Plus, along with Disney, have the A package. They got the big part of the deal out of this, which I believe is $400 million a year. This one here is $250 million a year, and so TBS and TNT are in, and the NHL gets a substantial raise in terms of the amount of money they make every year off their US TV deal. This kind of worked out exactly where they wanted it to. They've, I think, tripled their income from the TV deals in the States. The thing that I find interesting is when people say, well, it's just going to get buried. Look, if somebody's paying $250 million or $400 million a year for the rights to broadcast something, they're probably not paying that amount of money to bury it. So it's a 7-year deal between the NHL and TNT TBS will broadcast it through Turner. Bleacher Report also gets the rights to NHL highlights. Bleacher Report is run by Turner as well. So that's huge. That's a huge part of it. Disney Plus will have the streaming rights as well. ESPN Plus will be replacing NHL TV south of the border. None of this affects anything in Canada. I haven't seen anything in Canada where, so if you're worried about, well, what is it going to do to center ice? Nothing. I haven't seen anything change. And if you're concerned about the regional stuff, regional is different. This is the nationwide broadcasts. Regional broadcasts stay relatively the same. So, like for instance, Vegas has AT&T Sportsnet. That's gonna. I haven't seen anything telling me that's gonna change. So if you're worried about your local broadcasting, now this is all the national broadcasting rights. So they get the Winter Classics. They get all the Winter Classics. I didn't see the stadium games, so I guess the stadium games are with ESPN. They get the 2023, 2025, and 2027 finals. The even-numbered years are all going to be through ESPN Plus and on, I believe it's ABC, right? Which is, and then through Disney and all that. So they get one conference final a year. So each year, the networks will split conference finals, as well as half of each of the first 2 rounds. So I assume that the plan is to carry every series. I would not be surprised, though, if there was a series, let's say Vancouver and Calgary play each other. I would not be surprised if neither of the U.S. networks pick that up, only because they know it would draw really low ratings. But if it's Boston-Pittsburgh, Washington-Pittsburgh, these ones are going to get ratings. And, it'll be interesting to see which series end up where. 72 regular season games will be carried on TBS and TNT. Where it also gets interesting is I've already seen reports saying so AEW might get moved off of Wednesdays. That's the wrestling program they carry every Wednesday. And of course, with NBC, we have Wednesday night rivalry hockey. Odds are that moves to TBS TNT. So does it end up on TBS or does it go to TNT? And will that affect the other products as well? And of course, it's only interesting to me because I do watch AEW. Now, obviously not through TNT. I watch it in Canada through TSN, but still, it's interesting to see if that'll change its nights. But there you go. So TBS TNT gets it. ESPN has the other half. NBC is out. They are officially out. They're done. And I guess we could see this coming where NBC Sports Network is going away. And so there was talk about how they might be able to keep the NHL on in various manners, but I don't think they have the appetite for it. And clearly, Turner is excited. They've already, given out a public statement on how excited they are to have the NHL product coming in next season, and they'll promote the hell out of it. One thing with TNT, TBS, they cross-promote every product, every show on their channel, lots. So there'll be a lot of cross-promoting, and it'll be interesting to see how it works out. Here's some news that it almost feels like it's been generated by people on the internet. Patrick Roy wants to return to the NHL as a coach or as a GM, which I thought was interesting. Just the phrasing of that. Yeah, I'll come back as a coach or GM. So kind of like, I'll run the bench or I'll be the boss. Can I be the boss? I would think he'd draw some interest. Patrick Roy is a very intelligent hockey mind, and he was a very intelligent goaltender. He kind of revolutionized goaltending, right? And so I would think there'd be some interest in him as a GM. And as a coach in Colorado, it may have not ended up the way that everybody might have wanted, but I think there will be some interest. Now, the question then becomes a matter of, so Montreal then or not? See, because they have Dominic Ducharme, which I think is the guy they want to go with, but does that mean that at some point would Jeff Molson think about bringing in Roy to take over from Bergeron? Or Bergevin, I should say, not Bergeron. Someday, Patrice Bergeron, just by name alone, will end up being GM of the Canadiens, right? So, but yeah, Patrick Roy wants to return as a coach or a GM. I would think that he may get some interviews out of that. Seattle as a coach? I mean, really? Like, it maybe? Like, that might be like an out of the blue reaching out and getting a guy who is relatively well known, even for people outside of the NHL world. The name Patrick Roy, you know who Patrick Roy is. So, yeah, it might be an interesting pick if that were to happen. Seattle is supposed to be picking their coach over the next. They I think by the end of May they're supposed to have their coach picked. So maybe Roy's just putting his name out there, right? So I want to talk about Winnipeg a little bit here too. So Winnipeg, after last night's loss, they've got 4 regulation losses in a row. There's no reason to panic. They're going to make the playoffs, but they don't look like a team that's going to do anything in the playoffs right now based on the last 4 games. Anaheim has the longest losing streak in terms of regulation losses because New Jersey lost their last one in overtime. The regulation loss current record right now is Anaheim with 5. So it is concerning that they've got 4 in a row, and it's the first time it's happened this season. But what's more concerning to me is that Hellebuck's appeared in 10 games so far in April. He has 5 games where he's had a save percentage below 900. He's been pulled twice in his last 3 starts, and he's lost 4 of his last 5 decisions. Connor Hellebuck can be one of the best goalies in the league. There's a reason he won the Vezina. But you know, it's gone cold for him and for the team in front of him. And we only have a couple of weeks here for them to get it together and figure it out. And maybe it's just it's been a bad matchup with Toronto and with Edmonton. But those are the teams you have to beat if you're going to move on in the playoffs. So if that's the case, then, right, that might be the end of their playoffs. We'll see how things go for them. But yeah. And then we end off with a team in Buffalo that's been the discussion of losing streaks where they had 18 losses in a row. And Ullmark may very well be out for the rest of the season. So Linus Ullmark, who's had a really good season, now he's out for the rest of the year. And yeah, we'll see how things go for Buffalo from here. Luukkonen's getting another start tonight. So that's the good news. The good news is they are giving Luukkonen starts. And Hutton apparently had another setback in his return quest. So it may be Luukkonen and Tokarski from here for the rest of the season. Which, if you end up getting the number 1 draft pick, which is likely Owen Power, it may not end up being a bad consolation prize. Might be exactly what they need on the blue line. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always, including if you think Beniers should be the guy that Buffalo would go after. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.